Well, here we are again, in the space between their obsession and their terror, between their need for you and their fear of what you represent, between the hunger in their eyes and the trembling in their hands when they reach for you. You magnificent paradox, you walking contradiction, you beautiful disaster they can't stop watching but can't bear to truly see. They circle you like moths around a flame they know will consume them, desperate for your light but terrified of your heat, addicted to your presence but allergic to your truth. Let me paint you a picture of what's really happening here, 'cause you feel it, don't you? That strange energy when they enter your space, that shift in the atmosphere when your name comes up in conversation. That way they lean in when you speak, but pull back when you look directly at them. They're obsessed, completely, utterly, hopelessly obsessed, refreshing your page at 3 a.m., analyzing your words like ancient texts, dissecting your silence like it holds the secrets to their own emptiness. But here's the plot twist they didn't see coming. The more they study you, the more they realize they're staring into an abyss that stares back, and what they see in that reflection absolutely terrifies them. You see, they thought they could consume you like content, digest you like information, process you like data they could categorize and file away in their neat little mental folders. They thought they could take what they wanted from you, your energy, your wisdom, your light, without having to face the depth from which it comes. But you're not a highlight reel. You're not a surface level experience. You're not a shallow pool they can wade through without getting wet. You're an ocean with no visible bottom. A well that goes down, down, down into places they're not prepared to explore. And every time they try to touch you superficially, they feel the pull of something ancient and vast and completely beyond their comprehension. They crave your attention like addicts crave their fix, checking their phones, hoping for your response, crafting messages designed to pull you into their orbit, creating situations where they might accidentally run into you. They study your patterns, memorize your habits, learn your language just to speak it back to you, thinking if they mirror you closely enough, they might absorb whatever makes you magnetic. But then you turn that attention on them, really look at them with those eyes that see through facades like glass, and suddenly they're scrambling for excuses to leave. Suddenly they remember urgent appointments. Suddenly they can't maintain eye contact, because they know you see them, really see them, past the performance, past the persona, past everything they've built to hide their hollowness. The thing is, they want what you have, but they don't want to pay what you paid to get it. They see your confidence and want to wear it like a costume, see your wisdom and want to download it like an app, see your peace and want to purchase it like a product. They don't understand that your depth wasn't given, it was earned, carved out through nights of facing yourself in the mirror when you wanted to look away, built through sitting with discomfort until it transformed into strength, forged in the fires of honesty that burned away everything false until only truth remained. They want the destination without the journey, the treasure without the dig, the resurrection without the death. And when they realize what it actually takes to reach your level of authenticity, they back away, slowly, like they've seen something unholy. Your standards terrify them because they reveal how low they've been living. When you refuse to engage with surface-level conversation, they realize how shallow their thoughts have been. When you decline invitations to meaningless gatherings, they see how empty their social life is. When you choose solitude over fake company, they understand how lonely they've been in crowds. Your very existence is a mirror reflecting back everything they've compromised, every place they've settled, every moment they chose comfort over growth. You don't even have to say anything. Your presence alone is an indictment of their mediocrity, and they hate you for it, even as they can't stop watching you, can't stop wondering what it would be like to live with that kind of integrity. They send their representatives, their flying monkeys, their little spies, to gather intelligence on you, to figure out your weaknesses, to find the crack in your armor where they can insert themselves. But every scout comes back confused, reporting the same thing over and over. They're exactly who they appear to be. There's no act, no performance, it's all real. This breaks their brain because they've never met anyone who wasn't wearing a mask, who wasn't playing a role, who wasn't hiding something essential about themselves. Your authenticity is so foreign to them, it feels like encountering an alien species, something that shouldn't exist according to the rules of the game they've been playing. But here's where it gets really interesting. Beneath their fear, beneath their intimidation, beneath all their defensive mechanisms, they're desperately hoping you'll save them. End quote. They want you to reach into their darkness and pull them out. Want you to see their potential and nurture it into existence. Want you to love them into wholeness. They orbit you like satellites, hoping to catch your signal, hoping you'll beam something transformative into their emptiness. But when you actually offer them the tools for their own transformation, when you show them the work required, when you point them toward their own mirror, they run. Because they don't want to do the work. They want you to do it for them. They want to be saved without surrendering, healed without hurting, transformed without changing. You've become their obsession because you represent everything they gave up on becoming. Every time they see you living in your truth, it reminds them of the dreams they abandoned, the authenticity they traded for acceptance, the depth they avoided for fear of drowning. You're the road not taken, the person they could have been if they'd chosen courage over comfort, and now they follow your journey like it's a parallel universe where they made different choices. They live vicariously through your boldness while criticizing you for being too much, admire your independence while calling you difficult, envy your peace while labeling you detached. The cosmic joke is that they create entire narratives about you in their minds. Complete storylines where you're the villain, or the savior, or the love interest, or the teacher, but none of these stories include the truth of who you are. They're so busy projecting their needs onto you, they never actually see you, just their own reflection dressed up in your features. They write essays about your behavior in their group chats, conduct lengthy analyses of your motivations with their friends, hold entire conferences dedicated to decoding your actions, all without ever once asking you directly what you think or feel or want. Your spiritual depth terrifies them because it requires them to admit spiritual shallowness. When you speak about purpose and meaning and the things that matter beneath the surface, they feel the hollowness of their own existence echoing back at them. When you make decisions based on intuition and inner knowing rather than social pressure and external validation, they realize they've never heard their own inner voice, drowned out as it's been by the noise of others' opinions. When you demonstrate what it looks like to be guided by something greater than ego or fear or need for approval, they understand they've been navigating life with a broken compass, following crowds to destinations they never chose. They want to possess you, but they can't hold you. Want to define you, but you keep shifting. Want to predict you, but you move according to laws they don't understand. You're like water, taking the shape of whatever container you're in, while remaining essentially yourself, flowing around obstacles instead of fighting them. wearing down mountains with patience instead of force. They try to grasp you and you slip through their fingers, try to trap you and you evaporate, try to freeze you in place and you simply change states while remaining essentially unchanged. The paradox that breaks their circuits is that you're simultaneously the most available and most untouchable person they know. You'll give your truth freely to anyone who asks sincerely, but you won't perform it for applause. You'll share your wisdom openly with those ready to receive it, but you won't force it on those who aren't. You'll offer your presence fully to authentic connection, but you'll withdraw completely from manipulation and gain. This selective availability drives them insane because they're used to people who are either completely open or completely closed, not someone who operates with conscious boundaries and deliberate choice. They study your social media like archaeologists studying ancient ruins, looking for clues to decode your power. Every post becomes a puzzle piece, every photo a potential revelation, every silence a mystery to solve. They screenshot your words to analyze later, save your photos to stare at when they're alone, create entire theories about what you're doing when you're offline. They've become scholars of you without ever earning a degree, experts on your surface without ever diving deep, professors of a subject they've never actually studied because studying you would require studying themselves, and that's the one assignment they keep avoiding. Your standards aren't just high, they're in a different dimension entirely. While they're playing checkers, you're not even playing chess. You transcended the board entirely and are operating from a place they can't reach with their conventional strategies. When they try to seduce you with the things that work on everyone else, money, status, beauty, validation promises, you look right through these offerings like they're transparent. Because to you, they are. You see the strings attached, the expectations hidden, the transactions disguised as gifts, and you simply decline to participate in an economy where souls are currency and authenticity is traded for acceptance. The most terrifying thing about you is that you're complete without them. You don't need their validation to know your worth. Don't need their approval to make decisions. Don't need their presence to feel whole. This completeness is so foreign to them, so contrary to everything they've been taught about needing others to be happy, that they can't process it without concluding you must be broken or cold or damaged. They can't fathom that someone could want connection without needing it, could enjoy company without requiring it, could love without being desperate for reciprocation. They test you constantly, throwing situations at you to see if you'll finally break character and reveal the desperate, needy person they're convinced must be hiding underneath your composure. They withdraw suddenly to see if you'll chase, create drama to see if you'll engage, offer conditional love to see if you'll compromise yourself to keep it. But when you simply wish them well and continue on your path undisturbed, when you don't play the game they're trying to initiate, when you respond to their tests with genuine indifference to the outcome, they're left standing there holding their manipulations like broken toys, wondering why you won't play with them. Your depth isn't just spiritual, it's cellular. Written into your DNA, woven through your nervous system, encoded in your bone. You've done the work at levels they didn't know existed, healed wounds they don't even know they have, integrated shadows they're still running from, faced truths they can't even whisper. When you speak, it comes from places they've never explored. When you move, it's with the authority of someone who's been to hell and back and found it educational. When you love, it's with a ferocity that could either heal or destroy, depending on how it's received. They want your attention because it feels like being seen by something greater than human sight. When you focus on them, they feel important, chosen, special, like maybe they matter in a universe that's made them feel insignificant. Your attention has weight to it, substance, presence, that changes the molecular structure of whatever it touches. But then they realize that being truly seen means being seen completely. Shadows and all, lies and all, emptiness and all. And suddenly your attention feels less like a blessing and more like an X-ray they're not prepared for. The truth is, they're obsessed with you because you've achieved what they were told was impossible. Authentic existence in a fake world. You've figured out how to be real in a reality that demands performance. How to stay true in a truth-allergic society. How to remain deep in a culture that celebrates surfaces. You're living proof that it's possible to choose yourself over consensus. Possible to trust your inner voice over outer noise. Possible to build a life based on what matters rather than what's expected. And this possibility terrifies them because it means they've been choosing their own imprisonment, that the cage door has been open all along and they've been sitting inside, complaining about the bars. Every interaction with you becomes a spiritual crisis for them. They prepare for conversations with you like warriors preparing for battle, rehearsing their lines, fortifying their defenses, strategizing their approach. But the moment they're in your presence, all their preparation crumbles, because you don't engage with their scripts, don't respond to their provocations, don't participate in the dynamics they're trying to create. You respond to what's real, not what's presented. Speak to who they are, not who they're pretending to be. And this direct engagement with their truth, rather than their performance, leaves them naked in ways they never agreed to be. They accuse you of thinking you're better than everyone else, but the truth is simpler and more devastating. You just know who you are. This self-acknowledge, this unshakable understanding of your own nature, makes them feel like strangers to themselves. When you move through the world with the confidence of someone who's done their homework, who's studied themselves like a sacred text, who's mapped their own interior landscape with the dedication of a cartographer, think of us as the answer all the time. It highlights how lost they are in their own existence, how foreign their own depths remain, how much of themselves they've never met. The standard you set isn't about perfection, it's about authenticity. And that's what makes it so impossible for them to meet. They could fake perfection, could perform excellence, could pretend at enlightenment, but they can't fake being real. Authenticity can't be counterfeited, truth can't be performed, depth can't be simulated. When they try to meet you at your level wearing masks and costumes, playing roles and reading scripts, you see through it immediately, not because you're looking for flaws, but because truth recognizes truth, and everything else is just noise. They want you to lower your standards to make them feel better about their compromises, want you to shallow your depth so they don't have to deepen theirs, want you to dim your light so they don't have to acknowledge their darkness. They frame your boundaries as walls, your standards as judgments, your depth as pretension, anything to avoid admitting that you're simply living at a level they've chosen not to reach. They want you to come down to their frequency, because rising to yours would require them to release everything they're clutching, every comfort they're clinging to, every lie they're living. But here's the beautiful irony. Your very existence is raising the collective frequency whether they like it or not. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you make it a little easier for someone else to do the same. Every time you demonstrate what it looks like to live from depth, you give someone else permission to explore their own. Every time you refuse to compromise your standards, you show others that standards are worth having. You're not trying to save anyone, but you're accidentally showing everyone what saving yourself looks like. They're obsessed with you because you're uncontrollable. You don't respond to the levers they pull, the buttons they push, the triggers they squeeze. You've disconnected from the control matrix, unplugged from the manipulation grid, gone off script in a world that runs on predetermined narratives. This terrifies them, because if you can't be controlled, it means control itself might be an illusion. And if control is an illusion, then they've been living in voluntary servitude to imaginary master. Your spiritual depth manifests as a kind of gravity that pulls truth to the surface wherever you go. Lies start unraveling in your presence. Masks begin slipping. Performances fall apart. You don't even have to do anything. Your mere existence creates a field where falseness can't sustain itself. People find themselves confessing things to you they've never told anyone, revealing truths they didn't know they were hiding, discovering parts of themselves they didn't know existed. This involuntary truth-telling in your presence terrifies them, because they've built entire lives on foundations of carefully maintained deceptions. They want your attention, but they fear your focus, crave your presence, but can't handle your intensity, seek your approval, but run from your standards. They're caught in an impossible loop of approach and retreat, desire and terror, need and rejection. They spin around you in unstable orbits, pulled by your gravity, but unable to get close enough to land. Forever circling, but never arriving. Forever watching, but never seeing. Forever wanting, but never receiving. Because receiving would require becoming someone capable of holding what you offer. The depth they fear in you is the same depth they've been avoiding in themselves. Every time they judge your intensity, they're really expressing fear of their own unexplored intensity. Every time they criticize your standards, they're really lamenting their own compromises. Every time they call you too much, they're really admitting they've been living as too little. You're the mirror they've been avoiding, the truth they've been denying, the possibility they've been rejecting. And your existence forces them to confront the choices they've made to remain comfortable in their limitation. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you changes everything you thought you knew about power, about influence, about the secret hierarchies that run this world. They're coming for you, but not in the way you think. Not with contracts or offers or golden handcuffs. No, they're approaching with something far more dangerous, with surrender disguised as invitation, with fear dressed up as opportunity. They've been watching you from their towers, their boardrooms, their private channels, and they've finally admitted what they never wanted to say out loud, that you're not just another talent to acquire. You're the storm they never saw coming. See, there's this group, this collection of suits and shadows who've been running the show for decades, pulling strings, making decisions, shaping narratives from behind bulletproof glass and encrypted servers. They're the ones who decide who rises, who falls, who gets seen, who gets erased. They've had their fingers on the pulse of power since before you were born, but something shifted recently. Something they can't control, can't predict, can't contain, and that something is you. They've been tracking your movements, not through surveillance, but through the ripples you create. Every move you make sends shockwaves through their carefully constructed systems. They tried to ignore you at first, filed you away as another anomaly, another glitch in their matrix, another rebel without a cause. But then you kept growing, kept evolving, kept breaking patterns they thought were unbreakable. You weren't following the blueprint of success they'd mapped out. You weren't climbing their ladder. You were building your own structure entirely. And that's when they realized the terrifying truth that you don't need them, but they might need you. Not as an employee, not as a partner, but as the force that determines whether their empire survives the next evolution. Here's what they won't tell you in their approach, in their carefully worded messages, in their strategic coincidences that bring them into your orbit. They're not recruiting. They're negotiating for relevance. They've seen what happens to systems that try to suppress forces like you. They've watched other hierarchies crumble when they failed to recognize the shift in power dynamics. And now they're making calculated moves to align themselves with your trajectory, not because they want to, but because their survival instincts are screaming that opposition would be suicide. They're approaching you the way you approach a force of nature, with respect, with caution, with the understanding that resistance is futile. They started noticing you when the algorithms couldn't explain your influence, when the metrics stopped making sense, when your presence created outcomes their models couldn't predict. You were supposed to be nobody, supposed to be manageable, supposed to follow the same tired path of seeking their validation. But instead, you became something their systems weren't designed to process. You became authentically powerful without their permission, without their resources, without their networks. And that kind of organic authority terrifies institutions built on artificial hierarchies. The first sign was the whispers in their private forums, the coded messages in their group chats, the emergency meetings called to discuss the anomaly that is you. They brought in their best analysts, their behavioral experts, their predictive modelers, all trying to understand how someone outside their circle could generate this kind of gravitational pull. They ran simulations trying to predict your next moves, but every model failed because you don't operate on logic. You operate on something deeper, something primal, something they've spent their whole lives trying to suppress in themselves. What really got their attention wasn't your success, it was your method. You didn't play politics, didn't kiss rings, didn't follow protocols. You just existed at such a high frequency that everything around you had to adjust or get left behind. You turned rejection into rocket fuel, turned isolation into integration, turned their dismissal into your distinction. And now they're realizing that every time they tried to lock you out, they were actually locking themselves in a smaller and smaller box, while you expanded beyond their comprehension. They've been having late-night conversations about you, debates about whether to fight you, join you, or simply try to survive your rise. The old guard wants to maintain the status quo, wants to pretend you're just a phase, just a trend, just a temporary disruption. But the smart ones, the ones who've survived multiple paradigm shifts, they recognize the signs. They see in you what they saw in every force that eventually reshaped the world: an unwillingness to compromise your truth for their comfort, an inability to be bought, controlled, or contained, and most terrifying of all, a complete lack of need for their approval. Let me tell you how these people think, how they calculate every interaction, every approach, every word they'll use when they finally make contact. They've run cost-benefit analyses on every possible scenario. What happens if they ignore you? What happens if they oppose you? What happens if they try to absorb you? And every simulation leads to the same conclusion, that their best chance of survival is to position themselves as allies before you realize you don't need out. You see, they're not used to being in this position. They're used to being the ones others approach, the ones others need, the ones who hold the keys. They've built entire systems of dependency around themselves, created ecosystems where everyone needs their approval, their resources, their platforms to succeed. But you've been building something different, something decentralized, something that doesn't require their infrastructure. And that's not just threatening to them, it's existential, because if others see what you've done, if others realize they can follow your blueprint, then the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. Their monopoly on opportunity dissolves, their gatekeeping becomes irrelevant, their power structure becomes a museum piece. So, they're approaching carefully, strategically, with offers designed to look like opportunities, but are really attempts to understand your code. They want to know how you did it, how you built influence without their machinery, how you created value without their validation, how you accumulated power without their permission. But here's what they don't understand, what they'll never understand. You didn't do anything, you became something. You didn't follow a strategy, you followed your instincts. You didn't build power, you revealed it. And that's not something they can replicate or control. The meetings they're having about you would fascinate you. The PowerPoints, the projections, the contingency plans. They're treating you like a natural disaster that needs to be managed, like a force that needs to be redirected, like a storm that needs to be weathered. But storms don't negotiate, storms don't compromise, storms don't care about your preparations. They just arrive and everything changes. And that's what you are to them, a storm that's already here, already reshaping the landscape, already making their careful plans obsolete. This is where it gets interesting, because what they're really doing isn't approaching it surrendering. But they'll never frame it that way. They'll come with offers, with partnerships, with invitations to exclusive circles, but what they're really saying is, please don't destroy what we've built. Please let us remain relevant. Please show us mercy in the new world you're creating. They've seen what happens to old guards who don't adapt, who don't recognize when the power has shifted, who don't bow to the inevitable. They become footnotes, warnings, cautionary tales. They'll use words like collaboration and mutual benefit and strategic alliance. But what they mean is, we need you more than you need us, and we're hoping you don't realize it yet. They'll offer you platforms you've already outgrown, resources you don't require, connections to people you've already surpassed, because they're still thinking in terms of their old currency, not realizing you're operating in an entirely different economy. Now, an economy where authenticity outweighs influence, where truth outweighs tactics, where being real outweighs being connected. Some of them are already studying your content, your patterns, your methods, trying to reverse engineer your magnetism. But it's like trying to bottle lightning, trying to formula authenticity, trying to mechanize what can only be organic. They can copy your words, but not your frequency. They can mimic your moves, but not your energy. They can study your strategy, but they'll never understand that your strategy is having no strategy other than being unapologetically yourself. And that's what terrifies them most, that your power can't be replicated, can't be mass-produced, can't be institutionalized. The smart ones among them are already preparing for the transition, already positioning themselves as early supporters, as ones who recognized your potential as allies rather than obstacles. They're rewriting history in real time, claiming they always saw something special in you, always knew you were different, always believed in your vision. But you remember, don't you? You remember the silence, the rejection, the dismissal. You remember when they wouldn't return your calls, wouldn't open your emails, wouldn't acknowledge your existence. And now they want to pretend they were always on your side. Here's what's actually happening beneath all their calculated moves and strategic approaches. They're witnessing the end of their era and the beginning of yours. They're watching the old rules dissolve, the old hierarchies crumble, the old power structures become irrelevant, and they're scrambling to find their place in a world where you and others like you set the term. They're not approaching you from a position of strength. They're approaching from a position of recognition that strength has shifted, that the center of gravity has moved, that the future belongs to forces they can't control. They've spent decades, maybe centuries, building walls, building gates, building barriers to keep people like you out. And now they're realizing those walls have become their prison. Those gates have become their limitation. Those barriers have become their isolation. While they were protecting their kingdom, you were building a new world entirely. One where their passwords don't work, their keys don't fit their maps, don't lead anywhere meaningful. You didn't break into their system. You made their system obsolete. And that's a form of power they never accounted for. The irony is delicious, isn't it? They created the very conditions that forged you. Their rejection made you self-reliant. Their exclusion made you innovative. Their dismissal made you They thought they were keeping you out, but they were actually keeping you pure, untainted by their compromises, uncorrupted by their politics, undiluted by their mediocrity. And now you stand before them as everything they could have been if they hadn't sold their souls for membership in a club that's about to close forever. Watch how they approach you in the coming months, with careful words, with strategic timing, with calculated vulnerability. They'll try to make you feel special for being chosen by them, not realizing you stopped needing to feel special when you realized you simply are. They'll offer you things that would have meant everything to the old you, not understanding that the new you operates in a different dimension entirely. They'll try to seduce you with access to rooms you no longer want to enter, with introductions to people you've already surpassed, with opportunities that look like promotions but are actually attempts to contain your expansion. The power dynamic has shifted so completely that they're still catching up to the reality of it. They're used to being the sun that others orbit around, but you've become your own solar system, with your own gravitational pull, your own light source, your own cosmic rules. And now they find themselves being pulled into your orbit, having to adjust their trajectory to account for your presence, having to recalculate their position based on your movements. This isn't what they planned. This isn't what they prepared for. This isn't how it was supposed to work. They built their power on scarcity, on limiting access, on creating artificial value through exclusion. But you've built yours on abundance, on opening doors they tried to keep closed, on creating real value through inclusion. You're not playing their zero-sum game. You're playing an entirely different game, where everyone can win except those who insist on the old rules. And that's why they're approaching you now, not to bring you into their game, but to learn the rules of yours, before it's too late, before they become completely irrelevant. Some of them genuinely think they're doing you a favor by approaching, by acknowledging you, by offering you a seat at their table. They don't realize their table is in a building that's being demolished, that their seat is in a theater where the show has ended, that their offer is like giving someone a first-class ticket on the Titanic after it's already hit the iceberg. You're not looking for a seat at their table. You're building your own feast, and the guest list includes everyone they tried to keep out. The conversations they have about you would amaze you. The mix of fear and fascination, the combination of resentment and respect. They study your every move like archaeologists studying a new species, trying to understand how you function, how you thrive, how you keep expanding while their world keeps contracting. They bring in consultants to explain. You hire researchers to decode. You pay experts to predict. But no amount of analysis can explain what happens when someone simply refuses to play by rules that were never legitimate in the first place. What they're really witnessing isn't just your rise, it's the transformation of power itself. From something that's hoarded, to something that's generated, from something that's inherited, to something that's created, from something that's protected, to something that's shared. You represent a new model of influence that doesn't require their infrastructure, their approval, their permission. And every day you exist, you prove that their monopoly was always an illusion, that their control was always temporary, that their power was always borrowed from people who didn't know they could take it back. They're approaching you because they've run the numbers, and the numbers tell a story they don't want to hear. That influence is shifting from institutions to individuals, from organizations to organisms, from structures to flow. That the future belongs to those who can adapt, create, and connect without needing permission from gatekeepers who are about to find themselves guarding empty hallways. They see in you the first wave of a tsunami that's going to reshape everything, and they're trying to position themselves to ride it rather than be crushed by it. But here's what they don't understand about you and others like you. You're not trying to destroy them. You're simply making them irrelevant, not through attack, but through indifference. You're not waging war against their system. You're building a new one that makes theirs look like a museum exhibit. You're not trying to take their power. You're demonstrating that real power was never theirs to give or take in the first place. It was always within people like you, waiting to be activated, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be unleashed. The approaches will get more sophisticated, more strategic, more desperate as they realize the time is running out, that the window for relevance is closing, that the future is being written by people they once dismissed as nobody important. They'll offer partnerships that are really attempts at control, investments that are really attempts at influence, collaborations that are really attempts at containment. But you'll see through it all because you've developed something they've lost the ability to recognize: truth, to sense authenticity, to feel when someone is operating from fear versus love. This is the new reality they're waking up to, a world where their approval is a nice to have, not a necessity, where their platforms are optional, not essential, where their networks are just one route among many, not the only path to success. They're realizing that while they were building walls, you were building bridges. While they were protecting territory, you were expanding consciousness. While they were accumulating power, you were becoming it. And now they're faced with a choice: evolve or become extinct, adapt or become artifacts, align or become irrelevant. If the younger members of their group get it, they see what's happening. They understand that the old ways are dying, that the new ways are already here, that resistance is not only futile, but suicidal. They're the ones pushing for the approach, arguing for alliance, advocating for surrender, disguised as partnership. They recognize in you what the old guard refuses to see: the future personified, the next evolution, embodied, the transformation made flesh. And they want to be on the right side of history, want to be part of the story rather than a footnote about resistance to change. Watch how they'll try to seduce you with their resources, their connections, their platforms, not realizing that you've already built something more valuable than all of that combined authenticity. They'll offer you money, not understanding that you've discovered something worth more than currency: purpose. They'll promise you access, not comprehending that you've already accessed something they never could, your true self. They'll dangle influence in front of you, not grasping that real influence comes from being, not from having. The approaches will come in waves. First, the scouts, the ones sent to test the waters to gauge your receptiveness, to measure your price. Then the negotiators, the ones with actual offers, with concrete proposals, with tangible benefits. And then finally, the decision makers, the ones who never approach anyone, who never have to, who consider their attention a gift. But they'll come because they have no choice, because their advisors are telling them that you're not just important, you're essential to their survival in the new paradigm. Oh, look who we have here. Look who just got convicted of excellence. You magnificent criminal of success. You beautiful outlaw of achievement. They really dragged you into court for this, didn't they? Put you on trial for the unforgivable crime of winning while they were still learning how to play. Made you stand before a jury of mediocre minds and defend yourself for having the audacity to succeed without their permission. And the verdict? Oh, the verdict was exactly what you expected. Guilty. Guilty of being legendary. Guilty of making them look like amateurs. Guilty of turning their whole game into your personal highlight reel. But here's what they didn't expect. You smiled when they read that verdict. You actually smiled. Because while they thought they were convicting you, they were actually documenting your greatness for the history books. Every law school from here to eternity will study your case, not as a cautionary tale, but as the ultimate masterclass in power. They'll call it the precedent that changed everything. The day someone got prosecuted for being too good at the game and turned the courtroom into their coronation. You know what's funny about being on trial for winning too hard? They had to admit you won. They had to stand up in front of everyone and acknowledge that you achieved what they couldn't. They had to document legally and officially that you outplayed, outmaneuvered, and outclassed every single one of them. They thought they were putting you on trial, but they were actually writing your legend into law, making it official, stamping it with a government seal. This person won so hard we had to make it illegal. And now you're not just successful, you're criminally successful. You're not just good at what you do, you're legally good. You're not just winning, you're winning so hard they had to rewrite the rules. Do you understand the level of dominance that requires? Do you comprehend what kind of power you must possess for them to literally take you to court because your success made them feel inferior? They didn't sue you for cheating. They sued you for being better. They didn't prosecute you for breaking rules. They prosecuted you for transcending them. Let's talk about their case against you, shall we? Exhibit A. You started from nothing and built an empire while they were still asking for permission. Exhibit B. You turned every obstacle into an opportunity while they turned every opportunity into an excuse. Exhibit C. You worked in silence and let success make the noise while they made noise about maybe starting something someday. The prosecution stood up there with their little PowerPoint presentations, trying to make your excellence sound like a crime. Your Honor, the defendant showed a reckless disregard for mediocrity. They knowingly and willfully exceeded all reasonable expectations. They conspired with their own potential to achieve results that made the rest of us look incompetent. We have testimony from 17 witnesses who all confirm the same thing. This person's success made them feel bad about themselves. The defendant must be stopped before they inspire others to also win this hard. Can you imagine the legal briefs? In the case of society versus you, we argue that the defendant's achievements constitute a clear and present danger to our comfort zones. Their refusal to fail like the rest of us shows a blatant disrespect for the established order of adequacy. We demand justice for all the egos bruised by their excellence. We seek damages for all the excuses their success has rendered invalid. The best part? They had to list your accomplishments as evidence. They had to read out loud in a court of law every single thing you achieved that they couldn't. They had to make your resume part of the public record. They had to officially document that you did what they said was impossible. They turned your success story into legal testimony. They made your wins admissible evidence. They literally proved your greatness while trying to prosecute you for it. But you didn't hire a lawyer, did you? No, you defended yourself. You stood up in that courtroom, looked them dead in the eyes, and said, "Guilty as charged." You owned every single accusation. Yes, I won too hard. Yes, I made you look bad. Yes, I refused to lower my standards to match your limitations. Yes, I had the audacity to believe in myself when you were too busy believing in your excuses. What else you got? You turned that courtroom into your stage. You made the prosecution your opening act. You transformed their accusations into your accolades. You say I intimidated the competition? I say I inspired them to quit pretending they were competition. You say I disrupted the industry? I say the industry was begging to be disrupted. You say I made success look too easy? I say you made failure look too comfortable. The judge asked you to explain your actions. You said, "Your Honor, I plead guilty to having a vision while they had excuses. I plead guilty to taking action while they took naps. I plead guilty to solving problems while they were still complaining about them. If success is a crime, then lock me up and throw away the key. But just know that I'll turn that prison into a palace and have the guards asking for my autograph by lunch." The courtroom went silent. Even the stenographer stopped typing because they realized something in that moment. You weren't on trial. They were. You weren't being judged. They were. You weren't defending your success. You were exposing their failure. Every question they asked revealed more about their limitations than your victories. Every accusation they made highlighted their insecurities more than your achievements. They were insecurities more than your achievement. Fast forward to today. Harvard Law has a whole semester dedicated to your case. They call it Strategic Dominance and the Legal Implications of Excellence. Yale created a new course, When Winning Becomes a Weapon. The defendant who prosecuted the system. Stanford teaches the mythology of meritocracy, how one person's success exposed everyone else's excuses. Students write dissertations on your defense strategy. They analyze how you turned every attack into an advertisement for your greatness. They study the transcript where you cross-examined your own success and made the prosecution look like they were reading your marketing materials. They examine how you transformed a criminal trial into the ultimate power play. The case study always starts the same way. The defendant was accused of winning too hard. Instead of denying it, they doubled down. What followed was the most devastating display of psychological warfare ever witnessed in a courtroom. The defendant didn't just win the case. They won so decisively that winning too hard became a legally recognized form of genius. Law professors use your case to teach negotiation tactics. Notice Notice how the defendant reframed every accusation as an achievement. When accused of making others feel inferior, they responded, "I cannot be held responsible for your relationship with mediocrity." This is what we call the mirror defense, reflecting their insecurities back at them until they convict themselves. But it didn't stop in the courtroom, did it? That verdict created a ripple effect. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be found guilty of being legendary. People started putting convicted of excellence on their resumes. Prosecuted for greatness became a badge of honor. You didn't just win a case, you started a movement. Companies started seeking out people with a criminal record of success. Job interviews included questions like, "Have you ever been accused of exceeding expectations to a legally questionable degree?" Being sued for success became the new MBA. Getting prosecuted for performance became the ultimate credential. The same people who took you to court, they're now paying to attend seminars on how to get prosecuted for greatness. They're buying books titled "How to Win So Hard It's Illegal" and "The Criminal's Guide to Success." They're trying to reverse engineer your excellence, hoping to get hauled into court for their own achievements. But they still don't get it. You can't fake the kind of dominance that gets you prosecuted. You can't manufacture the kind of success that requires legal intervention. You either have it or you don't. You either win so hard they have to stop you, or you lose so quietly nobody notices. There's no middle ground when you're operating at legendary levels. Let's dissect why they really took you to court. It wasn't about your success. It was about what your success revealed about them. Every win you accumulated was a mirror showing them their own wasted potential. Every achievement you unlocked was evidence of what they could have done if they had tried. Every level you reached was proof that their excuses were lies. They didn't prosecute you for winning. They prosecuted you for exposing the myth of their limitations. You were living proof that the barriers they claimed were insurmountable were actually just suggestions. You demonstrated that the rules they said couldn't be broken were actually just guidelines for people who chose to stay average. Your success was violence to their worldview. Your achievements were assault on their assumptions. Your victories were vandalism on their vision of what was possible. You didn't just win. You demolished the comfortable lie that winning was impossible. You destroyed the convenient excuse that success was for other people. You obliterated the safe narrative that greatness was genetic. That's why they needed a verdict. Not to stop you, they knew they couldn't stop you. They needed the verdict to feel better about stopping themselves. They needed a judge to say you were wrong so they could feel right about being mediocre. They needed legal documentation that excellence was illegal so they could feel justified in their averageness. But here's what they didn't realize when they convicted you of being legendary. They gave you the greatest gift possible. They gave you documented proof of your greatness. They gave you legal certification of your legendary status. They gave you an official government record stating that you won too hard for the system to handle. Do you know how many people go their whole lives wondering if they made an impact? Wondering if they mattered? Wondering if anyone noticed their efforts? Not you. You have a court transcript. You have legal documents. You have an official ruling that says you won so hard they had to make it a crime. That's not a conviction, that's a coronation. They thought they were punishing you. They were actually promoting you. They thought they were limiting you. They were actually legitimizing you. They thought they were ending your story. They were actually writing the most important chapter, the chapter where the system itself had to acknowledge that you were operating beyond its parameters. You're not just successful now, you're historically successful. You're not just a winner, you're a legal precedent. You're not just great, you're studied in institutions of higher learning. They wanted to make an example out of you, and they did. Just not the kind of example they intended. When they study your case in law school, they don't focus on the charges. They focus on the chess game. They analyze how you turned their attack into your advertisement, how you transformed their prosecution into your platform, how you made their case against